Some of them have faked their degree, but I caught them. And but Britain that those days used to have a degree called gentleman pass. For those who came from the colonies, they said they are inferior people, so we have to give them some extra marks. So they never gave them regular pass, but they gave them gentleman pass. So with gentleman pass, he came back to India. And congressmen called him what? Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. I mean, you can call Ambedkar Pandit, but you can't call Jawaharlal Nehru Pandit, you see. So this is the kind of prejudice you think. What I'm saying is that DNA shows we are all the same people. And if we have provide equal opportunities to all Indians, then we'll all be performing according to our ability and merit. And this DNA extends also to Muslims. Muslim DNA is the same as mine. Anyone who says we are different, I can have their DNA tested. I did it for Raj Thakre in Bombay. When he said all these UP taxiwalas are come from UP and taken our Marathi jobs. So I said to somebody, can you get me a piece of his hair? He said, go to the same hairdresser, I will get you. So he got me a bottle of his hair. Then I gave 100 rupees to a taxi driver. UP taxi driver said, give me a little piece of your hair. He thought I was mad, but for 100 rupees he's ready to do it. And he gave me a piece of his hair. I sent it to the microbiological laboratory of Hyderabad, and the test came that the DNA of both is the same. So I announced at a public meeting that Raj Thakre also came from UP because his DNA is the same as the UP taxi driver. So when Muslim DNA is the same as the Hindu DNA, there can be only one meaning, that Muslims came from the Hindu stock. Their ancestors were Hindus. So I tell the Muslims, you accept your ancestors as Hindus. Then I will say Hindustan is the land of Hindus, plus those others whose ancestors are Hindus. We are not a racial concept. Anybody can be a Hindu. Today, about Julia Roberts in Hollywood said she's a Hindu. Of course she's a Hindu. We accept her as a Hindu. I think you all know the story of Julia Roberts. She went to India and went to an ashram. Within 1 week, she was convinced the only way to find happiness is through Hinduism. She came back. She came back to Hollywood and announced in a press conference that she, her husband and the children are all become Hindus. She's still a practicing Hindu. So we are not got any racial concept. But the fact is, over the centuries we have been so much together. Nobody has come from outside. This Aryan, Dravidian, total bogus. There is no support for it. Just as Porus gentleman said, no historical record of India shows that Alexander even came to India. It is the Greek historians whom Alexander himself had brought, like our press people nowadays. They are called prostitutes nowadays in India. And they come with you. You put them up in 5-star hotels like today. They brought them. They were the ones who wrote that Alexander was a victorious man. Then why did he commit suicide in Iran on his way back? Alexander, he was so successful. So therefore, the history is being twisted to suit the British. They wanted to say we also are part of the same invasions which come to India. Originally there was all Dravidians, then Aryans came from Europe through Khyber Pass, beat up the Dravidians and drove them south. And as a consequence, there are two communities in India, Aryan and Dravidian, and they started a Dravidian movement. And that Dravidian movement, they got gullible people to say we want to separate Tamil Nadu. But of course, the people of Tamil Nadu never accepted it. So ultimately, they had to moderate also. But they continued this North Indian, South Indian business. And they kept saying that Ramayana should not be read in Tamil Nadu because Rama is North Indian And Ravana is our Dravidian god. I had once a quarrel with Karunanidhi on this, and I told him that I will prove to you that Ravan was born in an area just outside Delhi called Noida, in a village called Basarak. And even today, if you go to Basarak, you will see a big board. This is the village of Ravan. And Ravan then went to, and he married, by the way, to Mandodari, who came from Meerut. And Ravan went to Mansarovar. And there in Mansarovar, he did tapas. Lord Shiva gave him a boon. With that boon, he said, which is the most developed part of this continent? And he came to the conclusion, Sri Lanka, because Kuber was ruling, he had transformed Sri Lanka. So he went to Sri Lanka, conquered it, became a Raja. So Karunanidhi began to say that he is our God. And he started demeaning Sita, he started demeaning Rama. It went on till I convinced him that Ravana was a Brahmin who came from from Basarak, and he is a North Indian. So nowadays he doesn't speak about Ravana anymore. Many a times I've told a story about him. Nowadays he only is angry with Rama. When I fought in the Supreme Court against this Setu Samudram project, I said that Rama Setu cannot be ruptured because Setu Samudram project is economically not viable and so on. I didn't use religious arguments. But I said it is not economically viable. There are alternative routes to take goods to North India without having to go around Sri Lanka and so on and so forth. And the Supreme Court was very happy with my arguments, and therefore they have said that the Ram Setu cannot be touched, and now all that remains for our government to do. All our government needs to do now is to declare it as a national monument, which means the government will take care of it. And we are working on a project, Nitin Gadkari, the shipping ministry, working on a project that very soon, maybe in 2-3 years, maybe 4 years, our people will be able to walk across Rama Setu to Sri Lanka. And you will be surprised in Sri Lanka, Ashok Vatika is still there. Ravan's palace is still there. And that Sanjeevani mountain which Hanuman brought, that is also there. And in that, the vegetation is the same as the Himalayan vegetation. There is no common vegetation with Sri Lanka. So all that historical part is there. And so Karunanidhi, when he saw this happen, and the Supreme Court gave a decision in my favor, he said, who's Swami to call this Rama Setu? It is Adam's bridge. Was Rama an engineer? Which engineering college did he go to? So next day he fell ill, and he fell seriously ill. So he had to be taken to hospital, and the hospital's name was Ramachandra Medical Hospital. So I wrote him a letter. I hope he has got MBBS, otherwise you are dead. This is the way the mind has been poisoned. We fought throughout the whole of India. And the Indian people, the Hindu people, never distinguished between a loser and a winner, provided he fought with courage. Shivaji fought with courage and won, we celebrate him. Rana Pratap fought with courage and sacrifice, but he did not win. But we equally consider him a hero. Rani Jhansi is a hero. Similarly, Subhash Chandra Bose is a hero. Rani Chennamma is a hero. In Tamil Nadu, Kattabomman is a hero. All lost. They are courageous people who stood up. And that is what is important. The Hindu must therefore get courage. He must stand. Today we are being targeted. They're targeted by missionaries. They're targeted by terrorists of Islamic persuasion. And we are being all under siege. India, all these liberals talk about secularism. What secularism? Can there be secularism in India if India is a majority Islamic country? Can you tell me one country in the world which is ruled under Islamic as an Islamic state and gives secularism? Do you have secularism in Saudi Arabia? How many Hindus we have in Saudi Arabia working there? 20 lakhs, 2 million. Such a big number. And so we have in other places. So we want to know why there is no secularism in Saudi Arabia. They leave alone secularism. They don't let you celebrate Diwali. They don't let you build temples in Saudi Arabia. If you hold Satyanarayana Puja inside your house, you will be jailed. If you put Ramchandraji's photo in your pocket and go to work, you will be jailed. So I asked the Saudi Arabian prince who had come once to Delhi, and I had dinner with him. Why is this happening in your country? He said, that is our religion. We don't accept any other religion exists. I said, but our religion says all religions lead to God. He said, that you may want to do. But we believe there's only one way, and that is the way of Islam. And everybody else is a kafir. Either he converts or he's killed. So this is the philosophy. Why India is secular today? Because we are majority Hindu. That is why we are secular. But secular doesn't mean that you can do anything you like. Why can't we have a uniform civil code? They said, well, this is a communal agenda. I said, how can it be a communal agenda? It is there in the directive principle of the Indian Constitution. Most people don't know that Article 44 of the Indian Constitution says there shall be uniform civil code in the country. And the Supreme Court has 5 times told us, when are you going to implement uniform civil code? And I'm telling you secretly, Muslim women tell me, when are you bringing uniform civil code? Because the Muslim women are the ones who feel the pinch of this. They see that the rest of society, particularly Hindu society women, for all that is happening against them, but they still have freedom, they can work and so on, whereas they are put upon. In Sharia, by the way, in a court of law, 2 women witnesses equal to 1 man witness. I don't know how many people know this, but it's a shocking thing. In inheritance, for which I'm fighting a case very soon in the Supreme Court, Muslim women get only 1/6 what the boys get. Nobody talks about this obscurantism of Islam. They'll give us lectures every day on Hinduism and or obscurantism. The fact is that India is a democracy and a secular country only because we are a Muslim. We are not a Muslim country, but we are a Hindu majority country. No Islamic country today has democracy. People say Indonesia has, but I don't really consider it to be a full-fledged Islamic country. You know that 10,000 rupee note in Indonesia has Ganapati on it. I was in an international conference. I asked the finance minister, how did you put Ganapati there? He said, you see, in 1997 there was a financial crisis and our rupiah was coming down very fast. We don't know what to do. So somebody came and said from Bali, some Hindu came and told us, you put Ganapati's photo and rupee note and it will stop. And he said, we didn't have any other method, so we put Ganapati's photo. And it stopped. The decline stopped. In the middle of Jakarta, there is Sri Krishna sitting in his chariot giving a lecture to Arjuna. Their airline is called Garuda. Ours is called Air India. It's a secular name.
Beautiful Vishnu temple in Bali.
Exactly.
Beautiful tall statue.
Yes, yes. So they keep their names are also Sanskrit names. Yeah, the Megha Putri and was a prime minister or president. So in effect, I don't mind. In fact, in India, we welcome Hindu or Muslims because they are, after all, the same DNA as us. But only one condition: please accept your ancestors are Hindus. If your ancestors are Gori and Ghazni, then there is only one way you can go, and that is across the border. So therefore, how can we accept people who say that we are descendants of people who butchered us, raised our temples to the ground and built masjids on it? So therefore, we want to integrate. We have no problem with the Parsis, because the Parsis are completely integrated with us. When they came, Dwarka Shankara asked them, will you be wearing Persian clothes? They said, no, we'll take Gujarati clothes. Even today, Parsi women wear sari with the Gujarati way. Then they said, will you eat cow? They said, no, we will not eat cow. Today, no religious Parsi eats cow. So they have completely integrated themselves. The same way, we are not going to interfere in the religious practices of anybody because that's Hindu. We believe all religions lead to God. But we say that culturally, we are one people. And it must show itself. And Hindu culture means what? Relationship between man and woman, relationship between father and son, daughter and mother, all these relationships, we are totally different. You know that, what a difference there is between the family atmosphere in India and the family atmosphere in the United States amongst the white Americans. There's a totally different approach. So we want this family system, these values. We have certain values which the world, unless it's pointed out, people don't even know. When I came as a student to the class to take my PhD, my first class, my neighbor was by my side was sitting a white American, and he said, I have one question to ask you. Before the professor came, we had some chit chatting. So he asked me one question. I said, what? He said, why did you people accept Mahatma Gandhi as your leader? I said, what's wrong with that? He said, because the man is not properly dressed, you see. How can I accept a leader who is not properly dressed? And the thought about it is a fact. The man just had one langoti and he was going around with his bare body and, and people, all millions following him. Then I thought there are others also, all are sadhus and sannyasis. Look at the Pope, he's so well dressed. Look at the Imam of Makkah, how well dressed he is. But all sadhus only Bhagwa Kanda. So we venerate them. So I asked the Americans jokingly, supposing Mahatma Gandhi came and claimed leadership here, what would you do? He said, we'll put him in jail for indecent exposure. Now, shows the cultural difference there. That we have never made money, historically. Now I'm not talking about today. Today there's a lot of vikritis, as they say in Sanskrit, certain distortions. But we have never in our history, in our culture, ever said that a man's social status depended on how much wealth he had. Whereas in this society, in the American society, that is the main thing. Because we believe that if wealth becomes the main only criteria, it will lead to greed, and greed will lead to corruption. So therefore, even if you have money, you have social status when you are philanthropy, when you do philanthropy, when you give away your money beyond what you need. So these are the values for which we have to fight for and stand up for. Today we face major threats. Threats of westernization. There are many good values of westernization which I would welcome and adopt myself. One is punctuality. We are the most unpunctual people. Respect for contracts. The Americans give you a word. They will, if they want to break the contract, they will tell you, I want to break it and I'm willing to make compensation for it. They won't say that my grandmother is ill, so I could not meet the deadline. I had a friend whose grandmother died 6 times. That's world record. So, therefore, there are many Western values which I will accept. But the core value that we will not recognize wealth as the determining factor for your social status. What we will recognize as the highest form of living is knowledge and besides knowledge, your sacrifice. And that is the section whom we had originally said were Brahmins. Brahmins had nothing with them except the ability to teach, and they are sacrificed in the sense they had no wealth, they had no property, they had no weapons. But the Raja had to go to him and seek his sanction before he could take any major decision like declaring war. The monarchy in Europe, the king was everything, but not in our system, because we believed in decentralization of power. And in that decentralization, birth was not a factor. Because if birth was a factor, then Veda Vyasa could never have been a Maharishi who wrote the Ramayana, because his mother was a fisherwoman. Nor could Vishwamitra have been the Rishi of Rishis, because his father and mother were Kshatriyas. So there was never a birth factor, but this has become one of the, what would we call as the degenerations of our caste system, and therefore today it divides us, and therefore we must get rid of it. And you can have it for perhaps in your marriage or something like that, but even that is not correct, because genetically the closer you marry, the more genetic deformities come. So in fact, people should freely, should not anymore regard caste as a factor in marriage. So ultimately we should now move towards a society which is united as Hindus. He said, why can't you say united as Indians? I said, yes, first let us take 80% of the population, and then remaining 20%, we'll have. We don't have, it's not a Hindu in that sense, because Sikhs are there. Sikhs have a distinct relationship, distinct religion, but the Sikhs came out of us, and we'll never forget the Sikh community sacrifice to keep the Hindus alive in the Guru Tegh Bahadur and Guru Gobind Singh. The same thing with Jains, Buddhists. We have no, to call them Hindu, we may call them Hindu, they may not want to be called Hindu, doesn't matter. But they have come out of us, and therefore we accept them as there, and their main concepts and tenets are the same as Hinduism. And therefore we have no difficulty whatsoever. And they are not also a proselytizing type religion. And therefore there is complete harmony between Hindus, Sikhs, Muslims and all, Hindus, Sikhs, Jains and Buddhists, and even Parsis, because of the non-combative situation. The Jews also, we have no problems at all. They are very microscopic numbers, but the fact is that we had a Hindu-Jew dialogue in which I participated. They had only one clarification to seek. They said, do you have polytheism? I said, no. Swami Dayanand Saraswati, who is nowadays, today in a hospital near in Pennsylvania, he had led that discussion, and he beautifully argued that ours is one God in several manifestations for simplicity, for ease of teaching the theology. But ultimately Ishvara is a one God only. And therefore the Jewish rabbis accepted that and said there is no fundamental difference between Judaism and Hinduism, and therefore from then on we have been having continuous Hindu-Jewish faith dialogue. So we today say that we want only to be Hindus. The advantage, or the reason why people get frightened by that is because look at the impact on the elections. In the last election, I had given a slogan, unite the Hindus and divide the Muslims. So somebody wanted to file a case. I said, go ahead, file it, because I know the law, I know how to fight also. I've never lost a defamation case. In fact, I've generally not lost cases. It may take time, but ultimately I know my facts. I'm telling you that today, up till today, what was the electoral principle? Divide the Hindus and unite the minorities. I am reversing it. I am saying no, unite the Hindus and divide the minorities. That is what, and even in Christians, the Syrian Christians, we have no difficulty at all. They are very much identified with us. So therefore, today, the call has to be that we sink all our differences and forget about caste, forget about varna, and regard ourselves as Hindus, because we are being attacked as Hindus. What is this attack going on Rajiv Malhotra? Is there any sense in what they are saying against him? A man is the most original, brilliant mind. He has established the foundations of Hindu history, and I hope in the future the government of India invites him to make him a chairman of the new textbook committee and creates a textbook which all young people can read. But they are targeting him and spreading the word. They did it with me. When I was teaching at Harvard, I wrote an article in a Bombay newspaper where I said how to deal with Islamic terrorism. Now in that I said that the Muslims should identify with Hindus. The best way to identify is regarding themselves that according to their DNA, they are also have the same DNA as us, therefore their ancestors must be Hindus. If they don't accept it, then it means that they think that they are descendants of Gauri and Ghazni. Then they don't belong in India. I said, but they can stay in India. My recommendation is they should not get a right to vote if they do not accept this. Now, big halla in Harvard amongst the liberals, not amongst the students or the general public. And they said, no, you can't teach here. I said, oh, thank you. I was coming because you were asking me. Every year I had to spend 2.5 months in this country, and Indian politics was suffering because of that. Many of my enemies were happy that I was leaving the country, but I didn't want to do it. Today, they naturally regret because the situation has changed so much. Yesterday I addressed a meeting in Princeton, a very big, large crowd. They were all appreciative because now the Americans also realize that what we are facing in India, they are going to face in their own homeland. So I am saying to you today, the need of the hour is to become a good Hindu. As a global Hindu, it is not required that you should come and serve India. It is not required. You want to come, you are welcome. In fact, we have made a new rule which people are very agitated about, particularly the minorities. So anybody coming illegally from Bangladesh, if he is a Hindu, he will get citizenship. And if he is not, then he will have to make an application, will examine whether he came because of persecution or he came for other reasons, whether he's got some ability besides marrying 4 times. See, all these things we will have to take into account. So these things we have begun to make distinction. Today we regard all Hindus wherever they are, whatever they may be. There may be Jews who became Hindus, or the Chinese who became Hindus, or the whites who became Hindus. All Hindus for us is the same. We regard them as one cultural community, and the defense of that is the responsibility of India. That is a concept that we have theoretically accepted. It is to be translated in practical terms. But what can you do? I will say, first of all, while living in this country, while being good American citizens and loyal American citizens, your knowledge, your power, your access, your influence can be utilized in such a way that the Indo-US relationship is promoted. Because now I'm finding Indians all over. Somebody is president of Google, somebody is president of Microsoft, somebody is Surgeon General, some people are inside the White House also. All kinds of Indians now. I would like to see Indians go into politics. I would like to see, not by converting, you don't have to convert. You can be there's a lady from Honolulu, I think, Tulsi. She's openly Hindu. There's nothing wrong with this kind. This society today knows that it's much better that we deal with Hindus than any other nationality, because we have performed so well here. We are so orderly. We are so well behaved. So therefore, I'm saying that you get into every profession of importance here. Get into law, get into politics, get into police, become judges, become professors, all these, and then this knowledge, when we decide to access it, we should be able to do it, because India-US relationship is now going to grow, because we are facing a common threat, which is called ISIS. So India, US and Israel have to come together, and it is natural because we have manpower. Israel has intelligence. I mean, they know who is doing what, and the Americans have weapons. So complete complementarity between these three countries. And like in the case of Hitler, Churchill, Stalin and Roosevelt came together, the same way India, Israel and the United States has to come together to find a threat which is more barbaric, more terrible, more dangerous to the world than Hitler was, and that is ISIS. But in order to keep your identity, there are 4 or 5 things you have to do. One is you have to accept that you are not only a Hindu, but you bond with other Hindus. See, in India, you have 1 crore people assembling in the name of Kumbh Mela. So I ask everybody, are you happy you went and saw this huge sea of Hindus and you felt a sense of power? Then, nah, nothing like that. So then why did you go? Well, my daughter's not getting married, so I went to pray. Somebody said I didn't get promotion, so I went to pray. And we went all the way to Kumbh Mela just for this narrow goal. This bonding of Hindus, wherever he is, this is what Vivekananda says. Please read his speech when after leaving Chicago he went, the first stop was Lahore. In Lahore he made a speech on what is a Hindu. And he said, when in your veins an electric current passes, when somebody tells you I am also a Hindu, then you qualify to become a Hindu. So that identity must be there. How to cement that identity? There I would suggest either you or your children or your grandchildren should learn Sanskrit. It's easy to learn Sanskrit. And it is not some obscure thing that I'm telling you to do. Sanskrit is going to be the language of the future, because NASA has discovered that in the field of artificial intelligence, the best, most compliant language for the computer is Sanskrit. And therefore Sanskrit is become now a compulsory language to learn for getting a degree in artificial intelligence. You can see this by going to Google and saying NASA and Sanskrit, you will get all the readings. Even schools in Britain are now teaching Sanskrit. Germany, there is a craze. Surprisingly, Chinese, there is a craze for learning Sanskrit. And there are many school teachers who have gone on record in Britain who say learning of Sanskrit generates vibrations in your body which creates changes in your mental capacity. Now, all these things are there, but it's a superb language. It's a language which will bond you also, because the vocabulary of Sanskrit is there in every language, every Indian language. Some have more, some have less. Bengali has a lot, maybe 80-90%. Malayalam also has a lot. Even Tamil has 41% of its words from Sanskrit. Once I had an argument on Karunanidhi on this also. No, we are a separate language. What is this? No Sanskrit thing. So I said, then how your name is Karunanidhi? That's also Sanskrit. Why don't you change your name? You can see if you ask any DMK man what is the Tamil version of the word symbol for election symbol, he'll say Chinnam. In Sanskrit it is Chin. I said, what is your Chinnam? He says Udayan Suryan. I said, is this Tamil? This Udaya means rising and Suryan means sun. So rising sun is their election symbol. So you will find this in every language. And therefore, it will be very easy for you to learn Bengali, it will be very easy to learn Punjabi. All of them have common words from Sanskrit. And Sanskrit is written in Devanagari. Devanagari is something which you have to learn in addition to your mother tongue, the script of your mother tongue. Because Devanagari is already being used by Nepali, it's already being used by Marathi, it's already being used by Hindi. And Gujarati is almost like Devanagari. And so the principles of Devanagari Lipi are common to all religions, are common to all languages in our country. For instance, you write Ka in Tamil you write Ka like that. When you want to write Ki, you just put a matra on it. That's the same thing in Devanagari. That's the same thing in every language of India. And the script of every language. So that's another uniting factor. Third thing is, please learn the correct history of India. Because without that you cannot have a mindset which is true. And the correct history of India, you today get it in bits and pieces in websites, but in the end you will, in a very short period, maybe in a couple of years, I was just jokingly saying 4 years, but within 2 years you will have a textbook, or basic textbook, which gives you the correct history of India based on scientific basis. Science has today transformed many things. For long years people believed there was no such thing as a Ram temple. But in 2002, a commission of inquiry was set up by the Allahabad High Court, and that commission of inquiry was handed over to the investigation was handed over to the Archaeological Survey of India, and they found